time for our next gladiator in the arena. And, well, I don't think I would last very long in the pub scene, perhaps. But I'm going to go next.
Thankfully, that's that.
Now, this is more than disgraceful, if you ask me. This is downright perverse. The Home Office has dismissed the systemic rape of working-class girls by grooming gangs as a grievance narrative in a report. Rape, systematic, the industrial-scale abuse of vulnerable children swept aside as if the real problem is people being angry about it, right? As if you don't have a right to be. For years, thousands of girls were sacrificed at the altar of diversity, abused, ignored, abandoned, all because officials, those with a duty of care, were more terrified of being labelled racist than they were about the safeguarding of children. Predators saw these girls as disposable, as white trash, as far worse than I can possibly say on Ofcom regulated television. And the authorities looked the other way. And now, instead of reckoning that this shameful legacy is something we ought to just condemn, we get this instead. A report smearing anyone who dares to speak out as an extremist. I assume that makes me one. This isn't just tone deaf. It's absolutely bloody grotesque. I apologise if anyone is offended by the use of the B word. It's an insult to survivors. It's an insult to injustice. And it's an insult to the very idea of decency. You know, while victims in this country, we have many on this channel, rebuild their lives, shattered lives, the most awful trauma that you can possibly imagine. Officials are busy trying to control the narrative, even to this day, branding legitimate outrage, your legitimate outrage, as dangerous. This is the same cowardice and moral confusion that actually allowed these atrocities to happen in the first place. The British public has every right to be furious. It wasn't a mistake, it was a national scandal, a betrayal of the highest order of the most vulnerable. And now we're being told that expressing that anger about this abuse, that's the real problem here. No, the problem isn't the British public. The problem is the ideology of multiculturalism and the fear of offence that's turned basic truths into unspeakable heresies. We're talking about gladiators tonight. Well, we're going back to the days of the Romans. We're speaking about all of these things you can and cannot say. This isn't about a failure of policy. It's a failure of morality. And the public, rightly, won't stand for it. I find it absolutely disgusting that an official arm of the state can actually have a report like this published within it. And good for GB News and Stephen Edgington, actually, for publishing that on GB News' website. The government say now that they've, of course, looked into this and vice versa and all the rest of it. But is it not a sign of a Home Office that still just doesn't get it, that's still not on our side?
Well, it's the same elephant in the room, isn't it? Which is, we have a problem with men of Muslim faith, because that's what they are. It's not about the colour of their skin, it's about their faith and how they treat women and how they view women. And Maggie Oliver, who exposed all of this, along with the Times journalist, tells me that in this country, as we sit here, these grooming gangs are at work on our young, white, vulnerable girls in every town and city, and we need to be outraged and we need to expose them. But the problem is, I think our Home Office, along with every other institution, is captured by this multiculturalism, and they use the word Islamophobia to shut us down. And now they're using the threat of non-crime hate crimes to shut us down.
Yeah.
Links back beautifully.
Yeah, it does actually. That's a very good point, Renee.
And so will your wallet.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Our two stories intersect here, because if you have a regime that stifles speech, so you're not allowed to call out legitimate criticisms about a religion, not about race, about a religion, which is a choice, in that instance, people are too scared to call out these sorts of crimes. It's a really good point.
I mean, Susie, do you welcome then the election of someone like Kemi Badenoch as leader of the Conservative Party, because she's actually said on the BBC, much to their horror, that not all cultures are equally valid, and this was a cultural problem, was it not?
I mean, I think the report that you've just spoken of, or what's come out there, is completely appalling and wrong. We're talking about, I mean, I've actually worked with victims, seriously, of like child abuse with children, you know, and, you know, tried actually to get people convicted and whatnot. And so there is also a big issue here of rape in this country and conviction rates being appallingly low. And just to say, the Labour Party actually have, or the Labour government have committed to like, I think it's like 80 new rape courts, etc. So actually, I think this issue, we are going to deal with it. But there is, don't worry, I can hear we know there's a different issue here. And I agree, you know, there's a different issue here. But I think what I would say on it is, I suppose what I'd say is I agree with you. There's an issue here that does need to be tackled. And it is, you know, in some ways, I don't know, I feel like it goes back 15 years. You know, it's been a long...
Me, folks, that's it. It's the end of the...
No, but I mean, I'm not agreeing that. I think that... I mean, the thing that... Look, let's just say, Kemi Badenoch, and I think, look, you want healthy democracy, and you know, this is one of the great things about this country. You know, we're not China, you know, and what I do like about... Right. You know, what I like about Kemi Badenoch is she's happy, you know, she knows what she believes, and she's going to say it, and I think that is important.
But is she right on
and you want to have iron sharpening iron. Tell me what the statement was again.
The statement was that not all cultures are equally valid. Is she right to point that out, that we have a problem with certain cultures?
I mean, I don't...
Suella Braverman said that.
I mean, I don't know whether it's about certain cultures, but I think, look, there were big issues here, and what did happen, you know, with the grooming gangs,
what is happening?
and what is happening, you know, let's be honest. I mean, like, the police resources need to be going towards that rather than knocking on people's doors because they've written a certain tweet.
I do find it faintly comical that people on the left just can't provide a straight answer to that question, that not all cultures are equal. It's the most common sense, obvious thing of all time. Of course they're not equal.
Yeah, I think multiculturalism has failed in this country, and it's failed in specific pockets of the country, because there are some places where multiculturalism sort of works, actually, where, you know, there's parts of London where we can see that. But on the whole, where there is a single dominant culture that takes over a traditional British culture, there is a massive failure to integrate. There's a massive failure to assimilate. And what we get is groups like these grooming gangs forming who are unaccounted for. And we saw how the police have policed the things like the riots, where they let the community leaders lead rather than the police enforcing the law.
And the word community is used deliberately to make it all sound lovely and soft.
You're absolutely right. And what that's allowed is that, again, the police will step on the door and they'll go, right, we think there's something going on here. They'll be called racist, and then they're afraid to report it. Yeah. So we've got a real issue from top to bottom in the Home Office, which is now being infiltrated by wokies everywhere, and in the police service.
Yeah, Susie, Yol has written in, and Yol is a member of GB News. Thank you, Yol. He says, I beg your pardon, just wait till Labour's definition of Islamophobia is announced. Is that going to mean that someone like Kemi Badenoch, someone like Suella Braverman, cannot say what they've said?
No, I don't think so. Look, I think it's really important. You've got to have a debate about this. I'm not like disagreeing with lots of things you guys are saying. You've got to have a good debate about it. And look, ultimately, what happened in Rotherham? I mean, look, it disgusts us all. You know, it disgusts. And I hear what you're saying, that we've got it going on now. And I'm like, maybe we need to have a task force for it. Is there a task force for it? I don't know. I'm not an expert in this area. You've got to have something that deals with it. But what I'm saying is, look, having worked firsthand with kids that have gone through this, it is devastating, it is appalling. Like, for me, I felt my own anger and frustration that we couldn't get people convicted on it.
I tell you what, make Maggie Oliver, put her in charge. She's a hero in my eyes, an absolute hero.
And she should be ahead of the task force,
yes,
if we have one. And if there are these gangs grooming girls as we speak, they need to be outed now, whatever their culture.
Yeah. Who wants to kick us off in the Colosseum?
Me.
Oh, well, we're all in trouble.
Makes sense. OK, what an Orwellian world we live in. So this week, journalist Alison Pearson had the police knock at the door to accuse her of a non-crime hate crime. She wasn't actually allowed to know what the non-crime was, or even who the accuser was. In fact, she was told in no uncertain terms that it wasn't an accuser, it was a victim. But surely the moment that accusers instantly become victims, that must mean that the perpetrators instantly become guilty. But not, you know, that's not what the police say. According to the police, it's easier for them to police our tweets than it is for them to police our increasingly dangerous streets. Even more lunacy then appeared when we discovered that the police are intervening with 9-year-olds. So 9-year-olds in the playground now are not allowed to call a fellow 9-year-old a word that means stupid and rhymes with leotard. They're not allowed to tell a friend that they smell like a fish. Now, I know it's not nice and I know it's not kind, but the playground is a theatre of gladiatorial survival. It's where children learn how to behave, how to deal with each other, how to be resilient and what the real world is like. And you only need to look at young people today to see that they seem to have missed this teaching now. And we know why. Because the police are actually policing them into submission of their minds. Perhaps it's a deliberate plan. The elites are trying to eradicate the thing that they despise the most, free-thinking people. Let's face it, if they start with kids in the playground and they stop them arguing, teasing, debating, being unkind from time to time, eventually they will reach a point where they have adults like Stepford wives. And Stepford wives are very easily pushed into the next level of social credit systems. Too far a plan? I don't think so. I think it's where we're headed. Essentially, police are compiling a database of people with dodgy thoughts. And from there, when you have lists of people with dodgy thoughts, you know what happens next. We've seen it in China, we've seen it in Russia. You know, the PM this week thinks that these registers of non-crime hate crimes are a good thing, that they are a crime prevention tool. I wouldn't agree. I think crime is murder, rape, child abuse. So don't just sit back and accept this. We need to fight back. We need to speak up. We need to say no. I'm going to start right now. Darren, has anyone ever told you have a mouth like a dog's puckered up bottom?
No, they haven't. They've actually said far worse than that. I actually am the recipient, the owner of a non-crime hate incident.
Oh.
Yeah, I am. I interviewed Dr. David Starkey on YouTube, and they told me that they were going to arrest me, and that for broadcasting the interview, it was on the Black Lives Matter moment and the madness that enveloped the country at that time. And so, yes, I have one.
Well, there's a good chance we all have one. They don't even have to tell you that you've given it to you. And they've handed out 250,000 of these since 2014.
That's insane, isn't it? I think it's really scary to see where we're going here, because if people have some sort of police record, because this is a record of some kind, right? And they don't know about it.
Oh, no, because if you do a proper background check, a DBS check,
An enhanced DBS.
you can find it and you don't get the job.
But that's the thing. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't even know to tell the employer up front about the situation, right?
But this is it. This is where lists go. Lists of bad people.
If you search that on someone's criminal background check, right, and they've said something like, I don't know, the woman that was just banged up this week for saying that a migrant was a tramp. Mm-hmm. Right, that to me should not be a criminal offence.
Of course it shouldn't be a criminal
It shouldn't even be a non-crime hate incident. So when you look at that and you were to see someone's got a non-crime hate incident on their report, you would think that they had lynched a black person or something like that, or vice versa.
No, I think this is really interesting, obviously, because you're obviously on the left, Susie, as well. I want to know, because it didn't seem like this took place under the Tory government. I mean, I'm sure it did.
Although
it seems like the prevalence of it has all of a sudden become very spectacular.
I mean,
right?
And that more interestingly,
undercut Tory government.
I think unfortunately this is something that's gone on. Before Labour came in, which only a few months ago. I think my big thing on this is, there are so many crimes that are not being dealt with. Do you know what I mean? Like, there are people that live in poor areas where they've got actual crimes going on, which are really devastating people's lives. And then you've got police resources going into this. And I think there's two things here. There's some of what you're saying there, where you're policing faults and freedom of speech. And I'm not saying sometimes there aren't things going on that are problematic. But for me, almost the bigger issue is the injustice of there are people that have terrible antisocial behaviour, things that are actually affecting their ability to live their lives, and the police aren't dealing with that. And for me, that's the bigger injustice here.
Well, as a supporter of the Labour Party, though, when Sir Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, he wasn't exactly known for his penchant for defending freedom of expression. Do you think it's going to get worse under this government?
I don't think so. I don't think. Look. We've been in government for 4 months. Do you know what I mean? 4 months. This came in under the Tories, and I actually came in on GB News to debate about this.
Susie.
Right. So, firstly, the Prime Minister this week has actually said it's no big deal, and he really did just push it away and say actually it's a good crime prevention measure. And Yvette Cooper is known for wanting to be be authoritarian, and it worries me that she actually has relaxed these rules and told the police, go for it.
But Will, one thing I spoke to you about earlier today, don't worry, it wasn't that conversation, was about the fact that the College of Policing, which puts forward these guidelines, the Tories brought that in under David Cameron, so you cannot blame Susie's lot if I can put them that way.
I agree. It's the same with boats, it's the same with net zero, it's the same with freedom of speech. That rubbish Tory government was soft left version of they were a soft left government. Guys, here's the thing, and I think we're glossing over this. This was a 9-year-old child. A 9-year-old child is being bullied by the police for something he said in the playground. Like, I think with all this woke authoritarian nonsense, there are surreal, shocking moments that wake up the public. On the trans thing, it was women getting belted by men in sport. In COVID, it was seeing protesters during that period of time. I hope this is the moment where people wake up on this issue. I really do.
I hope so
convinced.
too. I hope so too. A clarion call from Dr. Renee.